Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, I know a lot of Raider Nation is calling for head coach Josh McDaniels' job. I'll tell you why I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon. That plus a whole lot more comes up on Tuesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for October 24th, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts to get the latest edition of the show. Of course, as always, if you're checking us out on YouTube, thanks so much. We definitely appreciate that. And we appreciate my man Ari. Does a great job each and every day making sure we're up on YouTube. You can hit him up on Twitter at Ari Producers. You can hit me up on Twitter as well at your boy Q254. And we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. As you can imagine, a ton of feedback from Monday's show, so we'll get as many calls and texts in as possible, but they're pretty lengthy, so it's tough to get a ton of them in. It's never personal. If I can't get your call or text on, I'm trying to get as much in as possible, but I have a lot, so I do appreciate your patience, and I'll get as many in as I can coming up in segment number 3. Segment number 2, we had an opportunity to catch up with head coach Josh McDaniels at the Intermountain Health Performance Center on Monday early in the day. I'll let you hear the questions that I asked him, the reason why I asked him, and the breakdown of what he had to say. That'll come up in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, I want to tell you why I don't think head coach Josh McDaniels is going anywhere anytime soon, even though I know a lot of Raider Nation would like to see him removed from his head coaching job. That's all coming up after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Following the Raiders' 30-12 loss to the Chicago Bears, they dropped their overall record to 3-4. Raider Nation had it. Raider Nation is done. Raider Nation called the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. Raider Nation tweeted at me. Raider Nation called Raider Nation Radio 920 to tell me about how they need to move on from head coach Josh McDaniels. He's not a good head coach. He's this, that, and the other, and they're done with the experiment. They're ready to move on from the coach. They're ready to move on from the GM, the defensive coordinator, the offensive coordinator, everybody. Just blow it up and start it all over. And that's exactly the reason why I don't think that that's going to happen anytime soon. Not because Raider Nation wants it to happen, but because I don't think Mark Davis wants to have the turnover again. I mean, I really don't. And I can't speak for him. I can only tell you what I've heard. I can only tell you what I believe to be true. And it really goes back to even when he hired John Gruden following the 2017 season after moving on from Jack Del Rio. He gave him that long contract extension because he wanted to have continuity. He gave the assistant coaches long contract extensions because he wanted to have the continuity. He wanted his team to be in the same system with the same head coach and have the same success year in and year out. It's something that we talked about quite a bit. You know, it's just he doesn't want the constant turnover. And we talk about it. We've talked about it for years that the turnover that the Raiders have at the coaching position and have had year after year after year is just too much, right? So at some point, you've got to find the right guy. You've got to find the right staff, front office and all, and you've got to put them in place and let them do what they do. So that's what he's attempting to do with this staff led by Dave Ziegler, Champ Kelly, Josh McDaniels, Patrick Graham, Mick Lombardi, right? Everyone. That's what he's attempting to do. And you see what he's done with the Aces. Hell, here in Vegas on Monday night, there was a parade for the back-to-back WNBA champion Las Vegas Aces. He went out and hired the best coach. The best coach available for the job was Becky Hammon, who was on the Spurs staff, and she's only led them to back-to-back championships. So that's what he felt he was doing when he hired head coach Josh McDaniels. He was looking at a guy that had been highly coveted by a lot of teams in the league, and regardless if you want to believe it or not, he has been, right? He's been offered many jobs that he's turned down. He wanted the Raiders job. For whatever reason, I don't know. He hasn't said to me what the exact reason was that he wanted the job, but he wanted the job. Dave Ziegler wanted the GM job with the silver and black. And so Mark Davis gave him to him with the idea that he's going to allow them to build the team up the way that they need to build it up. He said from the minute that he took over, when his father passed away, he was not a football guy. He was not a football operations guy. That's why he immediately went out and got a GM and Reggie McKenzie and let the GM hire his own guy and bring in his own guys and handle the football side of things. Well, we know how that worked out. then we know how it worked out with Gruden. And if it wasn't for the emails, Gruden would still be the head coach. There's no doubt about it. And I'm sure Derek Carr would probably still be the quarterback of the Silver and Black. And there'd probably be a lot of guys that aren't with the team anymore that would probably still be with the team right now if head coach John Gruden was still with the team, whether that's good or bad. Right? Whatever category you fall under, if it's good or bad, that's probably how it would be. So in comes Dave Ziegler, in comes Josh McDaniels. And they basically have let it be known that the playoff team that everyone believes that they inherited wasn't really a playoff team. So they go and they retool it, they revamp it, they bring in their guys, right, to do what they need them to do and succeed on their level. Problem is this year, they haven't had very much success. And honestly, as I talked about on Monday's show, it really feels like they've regressed from a season ago. And that to me is just mind-blowing. It has baffled me on why they've taken a step back. I would have thought, if anything, they would have improved and got better, right? Devontae Adams went for 1,500 yards a season ago, right? Double-digit touchdowns. Josh Jacobs led the league in rushing, 1,600 yards, double-digit touchdowns, right? And there was other guys that were involved in a major way that went out there and performed at a high level. And right now, this offense in particular can't even get over 20 points. And the defense has played well in certain games, but then you have games like Sunday where it's a complete no-show and guys look like they're going in slow motion. And, you know, Max Crosby is the guy that's going to go 100 miles an hour. There was a few plays that he was going a little bit slower on. Not many, because Max Crosby always is going super fast, but it almost felt like they thought they were going to show up to Chicago and just pick up a W. Like they were going to hand them a win without them going out and playing, which that falls on, in my opinion, that falls on head coaching, that falls on the coaching staff, that also falls on the players. You can't get complacent like that in the NFL. So back to Coach McDaniels, as you know, many people want him removed from his job. I just don't think that Mark Davis wants to press reset again. And that's been the biggest problem. And I forget, I was talking to multiple people when I was out and about on Monday doing my radio show. I was at the Oyo and inside the Underground Lounge. It's something I do every Monday Night Football. So I get to meet and greet with a bunch of Raider Nation. And they were talking about the coaching position and how there's some organizations across the league that have so much stability at that coaching job, right? Like, I mean, look at the Steelers, for example. They've had 3 coaches, period. Look how long Mike Tomlin's been there. So Mark Davis looks up, that's what he wants. You know, the Raiders have rinse and repeat with so many coaches, right? Fire, hire, fire, hire, fire, hire. Every time you do that, you press the reset button. And at some point, if there's some more performances like what we all saw on Sunday, maybe Mark Davis just has to bite the bullet and say, you know what, I can't do it, right? It's like having an employee that's a really employee that you really like, but he's not really a really good one. And it's just like one of those scenarios where you want this guy to succeed, you want this guy to be great, and it's just not working. So at some point you have to move on because you just know it's bad for business that he's there. That may be the case that, you know, Mark Davis runs into at some point. I don't think he's there yet. I don't know how many more games it would take that look like what we saw on Sunday for him to get there, right? The next 5 games looks like a murderer's row, if you ask me, right? Starting this Monday with Detroit, that's angry. They're pissed off. They just got mollywopped by the Ravens, so they're going to come in angry into their house and you know, welcome the Raiders in, and we'll see how that shakes out on Monday Night Football. They're going to want to really put it on the Raiders. Then they follow up with the Giants, the Jets, the Dolphins, the Chiefs. Like that, that's a rough stretch right there, right? That's 5 games of rough, could be potentially rough football. So who knows what could potentially happen after those 5 games? I don't know. I'm not privy to that. Right. And if someone ever tells me, hey, this is what's going to take, or this is what's going to happen, if this happens or that happens, then all of a sudden the coach is out or whatever, I'll tell you. I'll pass that on to you, which is probably why they don't tell me any of that, because they know I will. I don't have any problem with that. But I believe, and it's just my gut feeling, that Mark Davis wants nothing more than this to really work out so they don't have to press the reset button. So it's not another rebuild, even though it kind of feels like it's already in another rebuild anyway. Right? I mean, they had the 1 year last year where they go out and make the move for Devontae Adams, and I thought, man, they're going to make a push for the AFC West title. They're going to push Kansas City. They got all this firepower. You got Devontae, you got Darren Waller, you got Hunter Renfrow, you got Josh Jacobs. Oh my goodness, it's going to be on and popping. Derek Carr's, you know, getting back with his college teammate, and obviously it wasn't everything but that, right? As they only won 6 games in the season, and right now they've only won 3. Right. And I thought that they were in a pretty good position. Should have won that game against Chicago, would have been 4. And this next 5 games still would have been tough. But I felt like it would have been a little bit more positive than it is right now. And, you know, coming off that embarrassing loss to Chicago, it feels like it has a chance to snowball and get worse. This is up to the Raiders now to make sure that one loss doesn't beat them twice. And that was a bad loss to Chicago. But honestly, unless it gets really ugly, I do believe Josh McDaniels will be back next year because Mark Davis wants nothing more than just to have the continuity, wants to give this staff an opportunity to build it up in their image and prove what they can be. I think it was always a 3-year plan. Again, just my gut feeling. I could be wrong. Hell, Coach McDaniels could get fired tomorrow for all I know, right? But that's just my gut feeling, and that's all I'm going to ever bring to the show is my gut feeling on what I think is going on with the team. But that's what I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Obviously, there's 10 more games in the season. A lot can happen, positive or negative. And we just have to continue to monitor, continue to watch the games, see how they shake out, see what the team looks like, see what the performance looks like. Losing the locker room would be the ultimate bad for Josh McDaniels, and that may make Mark Davis pull the plug sooner than he'd like, is if he loses the locker room and it's obvious that the guys are no longer responding to the head coach. But again, that's what I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Coming up in segment number 2, you'll hear from the head coach. I asked him 3 questions. Just 3 at the Intermountain Health Performance Center on Monday. You'll hear those questions, the answers, and the breakdown of why I asked. That's coming up after I tell you about a couple sponsors here on the Locked On Raiders podcast, including LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs will help you find the right people for your team faster and for free. And believe me, at the radio station, we've looked for a lot of folks, and it's hard to find the right candidates. Sometimes you interview them, sometimes you talk to them, and they sound perfect, and then you get them in person and realize it's a dud. Right? I guess that happens in coaching sometimes too. But what you need to do is post your job on LinkedIn Jobs, add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. They got simple tools like screening questions, make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and who you'd like to hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number 1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. Right now, LinkedIn Jobs will help you find the qualified candidate you want to talk to faster. Again, post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I also want to tell you about PrizePicks. And you might wonder, what is PrizePicks? Well, it's just daily fantasy sports. Matter of fact, it's the easiest and most exciting daily fantasy sports in North America. You against the numbers. Instead of battling against players, sharks, pros, all of that, it's just you against the projections. That simple. You pick more than or less than 2 to 6 player stat projections, and all you got to do is watch the winnings roll in. And it's so simple to make your selections. You can do it in like less than 60 seconds. So in the time it takes me to read this spot, you could already have your projections in. And it doesn't matter what you're looking at. You could be looking at running backs, what Josh Jacobs is going to do in the game against the Lions, his projection stats, right? Or maybe Devontae Adams, or maybe Jimmy G if he's back, whoever the quarterback is. 2 to 6 players, that's all you do, and you can win a lot of money. You can actually turn $10 into $250. And the one cool thing, well, there's a lot of cool things about PrizePicks, but one of the really cool things about it is PrizePicks has the reboot policy. So your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For NFL games and college football top 25 matchups, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. Right now, you need to check out the players. You need to check out prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want you to hear from the head coach, Josh McDaniels. Had an opportunity to talk to the media on Monday, the media that made it back from Chicago. There was a lot of guys that were still making their way back from the Windy City, so there was only a handful of us there at the practice facility on Monday to talk to Coach. But I got 3 questions in, 3 questions that I thought were really relevant. Of course, I had questions about this team following the game. We talked about it and illustrated it quite a bit on Monday's show. So with that in mind, I took some of that and tried to turn those into questions that I can ask the coach about the performance from the Silver and Black on Sunday. So the first one is about if he saw this one coming, right? Because a lot of times you can see, and we've heard over the years, we've heard players say, yeah, I could kind of tell that it was going to be a bad game because the week of practice wasn't good. So that was the first question. Like, did you have any signs that this was going to happen based off what you saw in practice?
Was there anything that you saw in practice that made you feel like
Nothing.
you'd have a bad performance?
Nothing. And honestly, Q, like I felt like we had a good week. I thought we were ready to go. Went out there and had the 3 and out and then drive the ball down the field and have a chance to, take the lead early. And I didn't see anything like that, and we went on Friday and all that stuff, but there's none of that stuff an excuse. I think just ultimately the game kind of snowballed on us, and as I said yesterday, when you lose control of kind of the line of scrimmage / the score, then the game always feels like you're playing it backwards or you're chasing. And that's basically what yesterday felt like.
So there's the question I asked. You heard the response right there from Coach McDaniels. He felt like they had a really good week of practice, which really is troublesome. I really was kind of hoping he'd be like, yeah, you know what? Practice wasn't really as sharp as I'd like it to be. Guys weren't really looking like they were on point as much as I'd like them to be. But for him to feel like that they had a good week of practice and they did everything right and they left on Friday and they felt like they got enough rest, when I see that performance and I look back at it and see them on the field and them looking lethargic and them looking like they're really not there, again, I've said it a few times about that 10 a.m. Pacific time kickoffs. I know that for the longest that plagued the Raiders, but I feel like that they should be well beyond removed from that, right? They should not. That should not still be an excuse from them having to play in a different time zone and this, that, and the other. I get it. Right. I mean, I know traveling from time zone to time zone and having to do shows at certain times and it be later. I can think back to when I was in Bristol, right, and doing the shows from there and getting off the air at 1 o'clock in the morning, then having to do the podcast then, and not being able to leave the radio station to almost 4 in the morning. Like that threw everything off for me. But I still felt like you still got to bring your A game regardless of what time zone you're in. So I hate to try to use that as an excuse, but that's just what it felt like. They just did not look like they were ready to go, and they just looked very lethargic out there on the field, to say the least. Secondly, I asked about the defense and the performance they had, because everyone knew, and one of my keys to victory on Friday's show, you can go back and listen to it, I said off the top, first and foremost, you have to stop the run. You have to stop the run. You have to stop the run. I asked Coach McDaniels last week about the defensive tackles. How important were they going to be to stop the run, because that team wants to run the ball? And that's what they did. They ran for $173 with Deontay Foreman. Not their starting running back, but their backup running back. Not to mention a backup quarterback making his first start, right? Undrafted free agent out of a D2 school. There's no reason why they should allow the Bears to be able to run all over them. They should have loaded up the box like teams do against them to slow down Josh Jacobs, right? It should have loaded up the box, stopped the run, and made this guy beat him. And I'm not saying he wouldn't. Tyson Bagent went out there and he looked very comfortable. He was able to pick up the yards when he needed to pick up the yards. He made a few passes that he had to make. It was nothing overwhelming. It was nothing fantastic, but he was able to get some things done with his arms and his legs. So maybe they still would have won the game, but I would have much rather you say, you know what, Rook, you beat me, as opposed to what we want to do, right? We want to butter our bread by running the ball. 173 yards they ran for. Deontay Foreman had 3 touchdowns on the day, 2 on the ground and 1 through the air receiving. Like, that should be unacceptable. So the question that I asked was about the defense, who has been playing well, that they, allowed so many yards on the ground and they had so many missed tackles. You'll hear the question and the answer from Coach McDaniels.
Defense has been playing really well. Were you surprised that the Bears were able to run as much as they were, and then the missed tackles as well?
Yeah, I didn't, I don't think we tackled well. I mean, that's not a mystery. Gave up too many yards after we had an opportunity to contact the runner. So we're going to need to work on that and try to shore that up. I give credit to them. They did a good job. They had a couple unique ways to try to create space and separate the defense a little bit. We just, we're going to need to play the run like I said, we had been. You had mentioned that we'd been making some progress there. But just yesterday was clearly not our best, and there's going to be some things that we can see today that will help us.
So there's the question and the answer. And again, it just blows my mind how Patrick Graham and that defense didn't have a better game plan going into it. They allowed the Bears to do what the Bears wanted to do, which again still blows my mind, right? And again, the best example should be what every team has done to the Raiders this season. Nobody has allowed the Raiders to go over 100 yards rushing. Josh Jacobs hasn't gone over 100 yards rushing yet because they continue to load the box and dare the quarterback to beat him. They're not worried about the quarterback throwing the ball deep, so they're loading up the box, saying, okay, if you're going to run against a loaded box. Why wouldn't the Raiders load up the box? Why wouldn't they bring some heat after the quarterback? Why wouldn't they make him uncomfortable? To me, I don't understand where the game plan or what the game plan was. So that was the reason to ask the question about the defense. And it just, again, it was the strength of the team as far as I was concerned. I was giving them props. I still want to believe that they're getting better, but that was just an absolute no-show and an absolute miss by the defense, and particularly the run defense. But we talked about it quite a bit, Marcus Peters and his lack of effort when it came to tackling. Marcus Epps had a bad day as well as far as tackling goes, right? There was other guys. Divine Diablo went out, so then Luke Masterson came into the game, and he was there with Robert Spillane as the linebackers. Amik Robertson didn't have a great game. I mean, it was a bad day to have a bad day for that Raiders defense, period. And the final question that I had was about the offense, which is something that we talked about on Monday's show, about how it's basically regressed from a season ago. And the way to word that, and I remember talking about it on the show, is like, I got to find a way to word it so he'll answer the question, because I could answer and say, hey, what's up with the offense? Why is it not going? And it'll be like a 2-second answer. It'll be very limited. And so you have to think of a way. And I know a lot of Raider Nation doesn't want to hear this. A lot of Raider Nation will say, oh, you're giving him softballs. You're doing this and that. No, you've got to be able to talk in his language so you're able to at least get an answer out of him. Regardless if you like the answer or not, you've got to be able to speak in his language. So he always talks about execution and penalties is what makes the Raiders offense struggle. He told me that last time when I asked him about the disconnect in the red zone. Well, Q, it's execution and it's penalties. Okay, so I used that and turned it around and used that same thing not against him, but towards him. So he couldn't say, well, yeah, it was execution and penalties. So you'll hear the question again, as you had the other two, about the offense, the execution and the penalties, and why the offense hasn't been able to get going. Why he hasn't been able to get his finger on exactly what's going on with this offense with all the weapons that they have.
I know execution and penalties plays a big role in the offense, but does it feel like it just never has gotten started like it should with all the weapons that you guys have?
Yeah, Q, you're hitting it on the head. It's not one thing. We move the ball, and then we get bogged down with something, either miss a 3rd and short or there's a penalty here or there. Yesterday, we had a couple penalties and just didn't do very well on 3rd down the first 2.5, 3 quarters of the game. And there's a lot of little things that go into those plays. A football game can be changed by the execution of 4 or 5 different plays. Pick any 4 or 5 different plays, and you say, man, if we would have made this, if we would have made that. But at the end of the day, you did what you did, and we called what we called. And so whether it's a call you want to, choose differently, or an execution of a play or an assignment or whatever it might be, at the end of the day, we need to put together a performance that's representative of what we think we can be. And, we still are we're searching for that, and again, there's no shortcut to it. I think we got to have 11 guys on every play trying to do the right thing, which I think we do. We got to have more execution on a consistent basis against, good teams, and that's what it's going to require of us.
So there you go. I mean, again, it's not something hard hitting, earth shattering. He wasn't sweating when he left the media room, but I thought those are 3 very relevant questions. Did he see a dud coming, an egg being laid based off practice? What's going on with the defense, why they were allowing the Bears to do whatever they wanted to do, and in particular run the ball, and what has gone on with the offense that has a lot of weapons, has his guys in place, and has obviously regressed from a season ago. Again, thought those were very relevant questions, and you heard his answers. I don't know what that's going to do as far as how that changes things. When it came to the offense, he was, we're going to get back to it today. Comes to the defense, we're going to get back to it today. Okay, so they got to see what their pride is, right? I remember Jacoby Myers telling me in the locker room when they improved to 3-3, what does that mean, Q? Or what I asked him, what did that mean? He said, hey, it means we have a chance. How bad do we want it? Well, let's see how bad this team wants to turn things around based off of what happened on Sunday, how they want to get that taste out of their mouth. It's not going to be easy based off the team that they're going to play on Monday Night Football, the Detroit Lions, national TV. Don't go out there and lay an egg again and really embarrass yourself. Then Raider Nation will really be hot. But your calls and texts are coming up next, 707-654-4693. That's going to come up right after I tell you about Gametime. And really, you shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, theater events, whatever the case may be, whatever's near you, whatever you want to go to. Maybe you're coming to Las Vegas and you want to go to something and you're going to buy some last-minute tickets. Gametime is the way to make that happen. You can get last-minute tickets. They got flash deals, zone deals, easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area. Plus, you get to view from all seats in the venue, so you know exactly what you're buying when you're buying it. Lowest prices guaranteed, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, and a whole lot more. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. You can find those exclusive flash deals and sponsor deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and a whole lot more. Basically, everything we have here in Vegas, you can get tickets to. Again, they got the zone deals. You pick the section, and Gametime picks the seats for an average of 18% savings, and the Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Right now, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts. You have that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with Surf City Raider. He's calling to talk about Marcus Peters and his lack of effort when it comes to his tackling or lack of tackling. Here he is, Surf City Raider.
Hey, Q, this is Surf City Raider calling in after some time. And just want to raise the subject of one Marcus Ole Peters. We got to keep this guy out of the building. Release him. Pay him whatever is still on his contract. He's just one Raider that's dressed up for vacation, but really got no place to go. I am nominating him to the first ever Raiders Prom King Hall of Fame, and we're going to have to block out that number 24 because he's the, his thing is the antithesis of that number 24 on a Raiders jersey. So that's pretty much it. I decided this the moment I saw that lame play that the announcers even, noticed, and that's just a disgrace. So that's it, Q. Enjoy the show. Listen every day. And wishing you and the Raiderland well. Go Raiders.
Thanks for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And yeah, I mean, it really sucked to see that effort and know that that was highlighted on every, highlight show. I know I talked to Amber Theo Harris on my radio show on Monday, and she said that on the Silver and Black show with Eric Allen and James Jones, they highlighted that lack of effort as well. Again, I call it the Ole defense. I hate it. I can't stand it. I don't like it in basketball, and I sure don't like it in football. You got to get your nose in there. You got to tackle. You got to be that guy. He's the guy who said about raising the standard. The standard is going to be different. The standard that's been the standard is not acceptable. Well, that wasn't acceptable either. Right? That's just not. I actually had a guy call in my radio show when I was talking about Marcus Peters and that terrible effort that he gave to tackle and claimed to be a professional athlete. He didn't say what sport or whatever, but he was a professional athlete, and we shouldn't talk about players on the air because it gets back to him and that hurts their feelings. Well, that effort that he put out there on the field, that should hurt his feelings just because he knows that that's on wax. That's on film. That should hurt his own feelings, knowing that that's the tape that he's got to carry with him, that everyone in that locker room, everyone on that team reviewed on Monday, saw that tape and saw him with that lackluster effort. That should hurt his feelings as opposed to what anybody has said. Not to mention he's rocking that 24 and really not doing any justice to that number. But Surf City Raider, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. Up next, I got a text from Brent from Boston. He said, "Hey, Q, Brent from Boston checking in with some questions for you after a completely embarrassing loss for the nation. I'm not even going to mention the game we just played because I don't want to puke on my phone as I type this text. The trade deadline looms, and I thought we were going to be buyers this week, but after this game, I changed my mind. I believe the McDaniels-Ziegler regime was guaranteed a minimum of 3 years to build their vision of a football organization. And with that being said, I don't think there's a fear of losing their jobs. So I think it's pretty obvious at this point we are not a playoff caliber team. Looking at this trade deadline from a seller's perspective, who do we move on from in hopes of accumulating some draft capital in what appears to be a very deep draft all over the board? As much as I love seeing Renfro, Adams, Jacobs, and Silver and Black, I think it might be the best to get some picks for them. We don't have the quarterback talent to maximize their talents and could get some picks from a contender. The only untouchable to me is Mad Max. Appreciate all you do for the nation. I know it is a lot more enjoyable for you to cover a winner than what we more likely have in store, which is a long season. So keep your head up, Q. Still bleeding Silver and Black, but seriously wounded." That's Brent from Boston. Thanks for the text. I appreciate you. And yeah, I thought that they were going to be buyers as well. I really did. Anticipated that win against the Bears and thought that they were going to go make a move for like a Danielle Hunter, someone that we saw really play well on Monday night against the 49ers as the Vikings picked up the surprising victory over the 49ers. Another game I was wrong about, but it happens, right? So I thought maybe a Danielle Hunter could be on the way. Thought about a couple other guys that are like a Brian Burns in Carolina. I thought that was kind of a stretch, but possibly Jalen Johnson, the cornerback from Chicago, thought that was a stretch. But after the performance that he had, hell, Chicago's like, yeah, we're going to keep him. We ain't going to move on from that dude, right? He's performing at a very high level. The trade deadline for the Raiders, I don't know who or what they would move on from. Of course, Devontae Adams is the name that would get you the most, but Devontae Adams also comes with a huge salary cap hit if they trade him, right? A huge salary cap hit. So I don't see that happening. Plus, that's their best player on offense. I just don't see them moving on from him. I really don't. Adam Schefter had the tweet over the weekend saying that they weren't moving on from Devontae Adams. I guess if someone gave him a huge offer, right? I mean, you'd have to take at least a first round pick for him. Hell, you gave up a first and a second for him. You'd have to at least get a first in return. I wouldn't move on from anything less than that. But I honestly don't think that they're going to trade him anyway, just because of the cap hit. Plus, he's their best player on offense. So Hunter Renfrow has always been the name that everyone's thrown out there. But what's he going to fetch, right? Maybe a sixth or a seventh in return, a late round pick. He's not going to send something back in return that's a high level pick. Josh Jacobs is on an expiring contract. He's got the 1-year deal. I guess that they can move on from him, and trade him. But what's he going to get back as a running back? He's not going to get a first round pick in return. So I don't really see a whole lot of assets that they can move on from that's going to get a lot of draft capital in return. I mean, the only guys that I think are desirable for other teams would be a Devontae, would be a Josh Jacobs, and would be a Mad Max. And I definitely don't see him moving on from Mad Max at all. So I really don't see it. Right. I mean, I think Hunter Renfrow could easily get moved, but again, I don't think that's going to get much in return. But besides that, I mean, who do you have? So I'm really kind of I'm there where, I can see them being sellers. I just don't know what they have to sell, if that makes sense. But thanks for the text. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Mario in Tucson. He's calling to talk about the intensity and energy of the Raiders on Sunday, or lack of intensity and energy of the Raiders on Sunday versus the Bears. Here's Mario in Tucson.
Q, Raider Nation. This is Mario in Tucson. I know I haven't called in a while, but hey, today's as good a day as any. So let's get this going. First thing I want to say is I'm embarrassed today a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Because of a game that came out like that. It looked like our team never got off the plane. They looked listless. They looked, tired. They looked like they weren't even into the game. And, I don't know if that's a player issue or if it is a coaching issue. But I know one thing. They didn't match Chicago's energy. They didn't match their spunk. They didn't match anything. They really just sat there and just got their asses kicked, basically. By a team that was missing offensive linemen, no starting quarterback, no props to them. They went out there and they gave that kid a game plan that was simple enough for him to, get the run game going and also get some passes, timely passes. He wasn't behind the downs. We did nothing to affect him at all. So, as a total team, we stunk. We stunk coaching. We stunk playing. Hell, we stunk. We were really bad at tackling. I saw so many arm tackles yesterday. Do these guys even want to play football? Because football is a physical sport. I'm 52 years old. I remember the days that people said, here's a line, you're not going to get crossed it. And if you do, you're going to get punished. Now, I know that the game's changed a little bit with the physicality, but it's still a physical sport. The Raiders showed none of that. And they got beat for it. So I'm just wondering, what are we doing here? Shouldn't we be trying to figure out a way to be more aggressive on offense and defense? And play calling. And, yeah, Aiden O'Connell should have started that game. Because if the plan is just to play this season out and not think about the playoffs or something, then you put that kid in there and let him go out there and take his lumps. I don't give a damn if he throws 3, 4, 5 interceptions. Get him out there because we need to see what we have in case we're a top 5 pick and we need to get ourselves another young quarterback because it's time. This BS has to stop. Feel bad for the people that bought tickets and traveled and did all that stuff. My God. Peace.
Thank you, Mario, for the call. I appreciate you. And, yeah, there was very little energy, very little excitement, or even want to about that game, really on both sides of the ball, right? Brian Hoyer, who, again, I thought was the best guy for the job for that day because I thought it was a one-day experiment and he would be able to go in there and not make mistakes and not sink the ship. But instead, he went and made mistakes, and he didn't play well. And I was actually surprised that Josh McDaniels didn't make the move at halftime to go to Aiden O'Connell, but he didn't. So, yeah, I mean, there just didn't seem like there was too much effort except for him trying to get the ball to Devontae early, then him trying to get the ball to Jacoby early, then him trying to get the ball back to Devontae late. That really felt like the only energy that was there, and the defense was kind of just running around, right, with like a chicken with their head cut off, but not even that kind of energy. It was just a bad game, man. It was a bad game, no doubt. Sounds like Jimmy's coming back. Some point this season, Aiden O'Connell will get his time. You know, a lot of people have said, got to find out what you have in the rookie. Remember, there's 10 games. So depending on how things go, I mean, Aiden O'Connell, for all I know, could be in on Monday. But when Aiden O'Connell gets in, I've said this 100 times, I'll say it again. When Aiden O'Connell gets in, he needs to have multiple games. That's all I'm saying. I have nothing against him, even though a lot of people, I got into an argument on Twitter, shocking, with the guy that told me I've had something against him ever since he was drafted. I do not. I did not know what he was when he was drafted. I didn't really have a lot of confidence in him as more than a backup. I still don't know what he is. He did some good things in the preseason. He did some good things towards the end of the game against the Chargers week 3. But all I've ever said and maintained the whole time, and I hope everyone hears me loud and clear because I've explained this 1,000 too many times. The only thing I want to see from Aiden O'Connell is get more than one start and then a stop. I want him to see the field for multiple games. That's all I keep saying. That's all a lot of people that thought Hoyer was the better idea. That's all they've been saying. But it's somehow that part of the conversation always gets lost. And the only thing you see and hear is, well, why did you want him there? What were you thinking? I've explained what I was thinking 1,000 times. I don't understand why I have to keep explaining it. I'm not talking about to you, but it's just like so many questions. The same damn question. Why did you want Hoyer? Why did you want Hoyer? I just explained it. But it's just, it's crazy. It's like as soon as you start to explain yourself, it's, okay, I'm going to stop listening. I don't know. It's pretty frustrating on my point that I feel like I have to keep going over the same part. But at some point this season, to your credit, Aiden O'Connell will get his chance, and he'll get multiple games. And you'll see what he has before the season's over. They'll know what they have in Aiden O'Connell before the season's over and as they go into the offseason. I guarantee you. But thanks for the call. I appreciate you. It's good to hear from you. I'm glad I was able to get your call in. I'm sure you are as well. One more text from Corporate Raider from Porter Ranch. He says, Q, it's Corporate Raider from Porter Ranch. Frustration, the only word to describe being a fan of this team. Like all poorly functioning companies, it all starts at the top of the food chain. Mark Davis cannot get out of his own way. He fired Jack Del Rio for Gruden when JDR has brought some stability. Then moved on from Bisaccia and brought in Josh when there were guys like Doug Peterson available who won a Super Bowl in the modern era and knows offense. Look at what he's done with the Jags. They look improved. Lastly, McDaniels is the problem. Simply his players are not performing under him. Getting his players will simply result in new players not performing for him. The running game is struggling because teams stack the box. Yes, but it's also about the blocking technique of the O-line. They are not being coached properly or not performing for their coach. Both are a reflection of bad coaching. McDaniels himself said in the presser that the Bears ran creative schemes to get their running backs in space. I'm sure we stacked the box, yet they ran for 175 yards versus our defense. McDaniels is not able to run creative schemes for the reigning NFL rushing champ. It is ridiculous. 24 games in is enough of a sample size to know it's time to start thinking about who we could find to be our next coach. And to those who say firing him now would be like throwing away the season, Bisaccia proved to us that you can still rally and win with the right guy wearing the headset. All we want is a team that wins. Not too much to ask as a loyal fan, Q. Love your pod. Keep doing your thing. That's from Corporate Raider from Porter Ranch. And, yeah, I mean, 24 games probably is enough, right? I mean, because it's just not getting better. I just think that they were assured more time. Just like I was explaining in segment number 1, I think that they were assured that they were going to get at least 3 years. They were going to get the opportunity to build this thing in their vision. And, you know, he is a creative mind. He just hasn't shown it. I mean, I know that he has the creativity. He wouldn't have been the offensive coordinator in New England as long as he was with the success that he had. And I get he had Tom Brady, but he's a pretty creative offensive mind, and that might be just who he is, an offensive coordinator and not a head coach. I don't know. He has not proven to be a good head coach, clearly, in Denver or with the Raiders. I mean, it's just that simple. So I don't know exactly what else he can do at this point, but there's 10 games left, and like I mentioned, the next 5 games looks like a murderer's row. So it could get uglier before it gets better, and then who knows what the conversation is like. Hell, I might not have any listeners by the end of the 5-game stretch. Everyone might be like, yeah, I'm done. And look, I don't blame you. I don't blame you for being frustrated and not want to hear nothing about the Raiders. I get it, right? I mean, it's my job, so I'm going to show up and do it every day. That's what I do, but I get it. I totally get it. There's times that, I feel like, man, what next? What's the next step? But again, this is where they're at. This is who they are, and this is what we got to deal with right now. But totally understand what you're saying. I think everything you broke down makes a lot of sense. We'll see if these players can step up and play for their coach next week. I will say, as far as the offensive line goes, the offensive line was being coached up by the same guy last year, and they did a good job helping Josh Jacobs lead the league in rushing. So they performed well for their coach last year. The only difference has been Van Roten. That's it. I mean, he's the only one that's different at that right guard position. Everyone else is the same. So I don't understand why they would, be able to block really well for Josh Jacobs a year ago, but they can't this year. That would be the only pushback that I have. But totally understand everything that you're talking about and appreciate the text. That's all I got time for. Got a call from Jack in Houston. We'll get to tomorrow. Got some more texts as well. Patrick Graham and Mick Lombardi will meet with the media around 11 o'clock this morning. So we'll get a chance to talk to the defensive coordinator and the offensive coordinator. Plus, we'll have many more conversations here as well. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.